Hello and welcome to this short recording on answering the new style check questions in functional skills assessments. NCFE functional skills papers changed from the 17th of October 2025, and one change is the addition of check questions. So you'll see here there's a question that's taken from a level 1 past paper. I've adapted it into the new style, and all of the questions, by the way, in this recording are not taken from the new sample or the new practice paper. They are taken from past questions adapted into the new style, and that is specifically so that if you wish to share this recording with your learners, they will not have seen any of the sample questions or the practice paper questions that you will likely need to use for a timed mock with them. So if we look at this question, level 1 question, Andy shops for all the materials he needs. The materials cost £85. This is a fifth of Andy's budget. How much is his total budget? And there's 2 marks available. In the past, that would be the question, and there would not have been a check question afterwards. However, in the new style, we've now got a check question. So show a reverse calculation to check your answer. And there's 1 mark available for this. Now, when I first saw this new style of questions in the new style papers, I was so pleased because we always encourage learners to check their answers. So to me, this seemed like a great way to achieve a mark while also checking work that may be worth even more marks. However, in the first set of assessments sat, the Chief Examiner noticed a variety of responses to the checking tasks, including some with just a calculation shown and no answer, so they did not get the mark. Some not attempted at all, just left completely blank, so a mark lost completely. Some that used a reverse instead of an estimation, because there's 2 styles of questions. We're going to look at both in this recording. There's estimation questions or reverse calculation check questions. So what happened in the first batch of assessments that was sat, the Chief Examiner noticed that learners were either doing a reverse when it asked for an estimation, or they were doing an estimation when it asked for a reverse. And so therefore no marks could be awarded. There were also some learners who did an estimation with a reverse, and that is not required. It's not required to do an estimation and a reverse. However, marks were still awarded for those learners because they had done what the check question had asked, and we didn't want to disadvantage them for doing both things, although it is not required, and we would not advise centres to teach this as the best strategy, since completing the check question fully, correctly does get the mark. It's nice and straightforward. So that is what we would like you to teach, please, if you're not already doing so. So this is the strategy that should absolutely be taught for these questions, and the purpose of this very short recording is to show some examples of approaching these questions. In the sample and practice papers available at level 1 and 2 currently, the subject content statements covered by the check questions are: at level 1, use multiplication facts and make connections with division facts. So this is likely to be a reverse calculation check, so learners need to know that multiplication and division are the reverses of one another. At level 2, learners need to be able to carry out calculations with numbers up to 1 million, including strategies to check answers, including estimation and approximation. Although reverse calculation is not explicitly stated in the subject content statement, it is implied by the including strategies part of the assessment of the statement. So it says including strategies like estimation and approximation, but that does not discount reverse calculation also at level 2. It's also possible that at level 1 there could be a question that assesses N15. Estimate answers to calculations using fractions and decimals. And I've added that in here because if you are purely looking at the current sample and practice papers, you'll notice that at level 1, the only check questions are check questions related to N4 using multiplication facts and making connections with division facts. So there's only examples of reverse questions, but that does not mean there could not, in a live assessment, be a check question that is looking at estimation at level 1. So at both level 1 and level 2, it's important that learners have both strategies. So one type of check question is a reverse calculation. We'll take a look at that now. First, we'll look at what we mean by a reverse calculation. When a reverse calculation is required, we mean that an inverse or a reverse operation needs to be calculated. The opposite of addition is subtraction. So we can check a subtraction calculation by completing an addition. So 9 take away 5 is 4. Let's check that. Well, let's add together 5 plus 4 and we do get 9. So there we've got a reverse calculation using addition and subtraction. The opposite of multiplication is division and vice versa. So to check a division calculation, we can complete a multiplication. And again, vice versa. So we've got 30 divided by 5 is 6. Let's check that. Well, is 6 times 5 30? Yes, it is. So we can check that. Now, the low numbers here are obviously much lower than would be expected at level 1 and level 2, but it can help when initially introducing this concept if your learners have not come across it before, or if they've forgotten, or if they haven't understood from when they've been taught previously. At level 1, learners need to be able to manage numbers up to 1 million. And at level 2, numbers of any size. So although we have very low numbers on this slide, please do prepare your learners once they fully understand the concept of reverse operations. They need to be able to practice it at level 2 with numbers of any size, and level 1 up to 1 million. Reverse or inverse operations is actually usually covered at entry level. However, using reverse operations as a strategy for checking at level 1 and level 2 should also be taught, aside from whether there are specific check questions, because it's important for learners to have strategies to check their calculations. So hopefully, if you're an experienced functional skills teacher, you will already have been teaching these strategies for your learners to check their answers. So we'll take a look at some assessment examples now. And as mentioned before, these are past questions written in the new style so that you can use this recording with your learners if you wish. So we've read this question already with Andy shopping for the materials he needs. The materials cost £85. This is a fifth of Andy's budget. How much is his total budget? So we can find the answer by doing a multiplication. So since it's a fifth of Andy's budget, 85 is a fifth, his total budget must be 85 times 5, which is £425. By the way, in the actual assessments, there is far more space in the answer boxes for your learners to place their answers. For the purposes of this recording, I've shrunk the answer boxes just to make sure that the writing of the questions is larger on the slide for you. So we've got our answer, brilliant. And then next it says use a reverse calculation to check your answer. And since we did a multiplication, then the reverse of this is a division. So let's see, is 425 divided by 5, does that equal the £85 of the materials? Yes, it does. And therefore, that is our check. We have done the reverse calculation, and importantly, we've also written what it equals, because this is what the Chief Examiner found. Learners might have written 425 divided by 5, but they did not write the equals 85 as an example. It's not necessary for your learners to write in the your check box. They can do if they would like, as long as we can see that clear reverse calculation with an answer. That is what is going to get your learner the mark, and that is also, aside from the mark, that is also what they will hopefully, if they've got enough time in their assessments, be doing for all of their questions. Checking through a reverse calculation is a brilliant way to check through your answers. Oh, and just important to note, I've used the division symbol on this slide. However, if your learners were doing an on-screen assessment, then the / symbol to show division is perfectly acceptable, or even writing div, divide by. The / is faster, obviously. Okay, now we've got a level 2 question, and again, this is a past question written in the new style. Callista mixes 3 colours to make teal coloured paint for the plastic game pieces. She mixes blue, green and yellow paint in the ratio of 4:2:1. Callista wants to make 14 litres of teal coloured paint. She thinks she needs 1.6 litres of yellow paint. Is she correct? Show how you decide. 2 marks available. So let's see. Our learner has highlighted the important information. So we see what the ratio is. We know that Callista wants to make 14 litres. So our learner has added up the parts in the ratio to see we've got 7 parts, divided the total amount of paint that she wants to make, 14, by the 7 parts, and we've got 2. So each part in the ratio is 2. And since yellow is the final part of the ratio, we need just 1 part of yellow for the teal paint. Then Callista actually needs 2 litres of yellow paint. So that's the answer we've given, and then we're asked to do a reverse calculation to check your answer. And let's see. So what we've got here is our learner has chosen to do the 2 times 7, so we're looking at the number of parts, how much a part is worth, which is 2, times 7, which is the total number of parts, and we get 14, and actually that is a reverse calculation of the second part that they've done above. And then just to double check that again, they've added up the parts in the ratio, given them a value of 2. So we've got 8 litres of blue is required, 4 litres of green and 2 litres of yellow, and that all adds up to 14. Now, in this instance, because the answer required 2 calculations, the check should also include 2 reverse calculations in order to gain the single mark. Learners should be aware that they will usually be required to perform 2 reverse calculations at level 2 in order to gain the single checking mark. So this is true at level 2 to do the 2 reverse calculations if the original question and the original answer required 2 calculations, but not at level 1. At level 1 it would just be 1 single reverse calculation. Now we're going to take a look at estimation style questions. Now, we use rounding to estimate in a day-to-day life. If I was to go out with two friends for dinner and the total came to £73.50, we might round that up to a total of £75 purely because that makes it easier to divide by 3. So we'd be paying £25 each, and then we'd hopefully add a bit of extra on top for a tip. At level 1 and 2, we have subject content statements that are assessed separately to check questions. These are approximate by rounding to a whole number or to 1 or 2 decimal places at level 1, and at level 2, order, approximate and compare decimals. Now, you might teach this by using a number line. In this case, we're going to round our number. We've got our number there is 41.2668, and we're going to round it to 2 decimal places. So that's a level 1 skill. Our number line has the numbers from 41.2 to 41.3 shown in intervals. So we would look at where the 41.2668 sits, and we would compare that with the halfway point between 41.26 and 41.27 to decide whether we round our number to 41.26 or 41.27. So the halfway point is 41.265. So it's the third digit in our number that we need to look at. If the third digit is smaller than 5, we would round down to 41.26 because it's closer. And then if it's 5 or above, we round up to 41.27. So in this instance, since the 6 there is higher than 5, we're going to round up the number to 41.27. So rounding is something that does need to be taught aside from check questions, and obviously this is going to support your learners with those check questions, and it's going to support your learners in their real life and studies, and giving them the ability to check all of their answers in their assessments. And also, in addition, when it comes to estimation, being able to estimate an answer before a calculation can help determine whether the answer is reasonable. And again, this should be something that learners are encouraged to do for all of their assessment questions. So here we have a level 1 example. Simon has a luggage allowance of 23 kilograms. He's already packed 18,400 grams. How many more kilograms can he pack? And our learner has highlighted the important information. So 23 kilograms is the total luggage allowance. So they've done 23 take away 18.4. So they've clearly got that from dividing the 18,400 by 1,000, since there are 1,000 grams in a kilogram. So 23 take away 18.4 is equal to 4.6. They've put that as their answer. And then for the check, they have rounded the 18.4 to the nearest whole number, so that's 18, and they have written 23 take away 18 equals 5. Remember, it is important to have what it equals, otherwise just writing 23 take away 18 here would not gain the learner the mark. And if your learners are worried about choosing the wrong level to round to, please reassure them that for the check question, it is their ability to use estimation for rounding. They're not being assessed on N12, which is approximate by rounding to a whole number or to 1 or 2 decimal places. They're actually not being assessed on that. That's the ability that they should have. But they're not being assessed on that. They are being assessed on being able to estimate answers to calculations using fractions and decimals, in this case decimals. So a sensible estimate, if it's a decimal number, is to round it to the nearest whole number. A typical hot tub holds 309 gallons of water when it is full. Chlorine needs to be added to the water. 250 gallons of water need 1.5 tablespoons of chlorine. 1 tablespoon of chlorine weighs 14 grams. How many grams of chlorine are needed for 309 gallons of water? Let's see what our learner's done here. So, sensible approach again. We've got the highlighter out and we've highlighted the key information. And then our first step that the learner's done is they've divided 309 by 250 to reach 1.236. So that's going to tell them that instead of one lot of chlorine, which is 1.5 tablespoons, they're going to need 1.236 lots of chlorine. And how much does one lot of chlorine weigh? That's their next calculation, 1.5, because that's the tablespoon, times 14, because each tablespoon is 14 grams. So one lot of chlorine is 21 grams, and therefore 1.236 lots of the 21 grams of chlorine. They've done the multiplication, and their answer is 25.956, and they've put that as their answer. And then it says to use estimation to check your answer. And here our learner has rounded the 309 gallons to 300, divided by 250 to get 1.2, and then they've done the 1.2 times 21 to reach 25.2. Now, there may be alternative estimations that can absolutely be awarded the mark. For example, the mark scheme for the estimation check question from our sample paper states OE, that means or equivalent, any reasonable calculation. It must include at least one estimate. So our learner has chosen to do the estimation of the 300, instead of 309, and then followed on through from that, giving answers each time for their calculations. However, a sensible rounding could have been to simply look at that calculation at the end, 1.236 times 21. Well, we could round that to 1.236 to the nearest whole number. That would be 1. Times, instead of 21, we could have said, well, we'll round that to the nearest 10 times 20. So it could have been 1 times 20. There's various different estimations that could be calculated, but providing it's a sensible check of the answer. Again, from the mark scheme here from the practice paper, it says any valid check of their working or answer using estimation, using their values. And the fact that it says using their values means that it is absolutely possible for a learner to get the first part of the question wrong, and then use rounding in the second part of the question to check their answers, and they could gain that mark for the check question. In summary, having strategies to check answers helps with all assessment questions and when using maths in real life. The check questions in NCFE assessments will always state which strategy to use. It will either say use a reverse calculation, in which case use a reverse calculation, or it will say use estimation, in which case use estimation. When reverse calculation is required, learners should complete the inverse operation from their working. And when estimation is required, learners should round numbers from the question or their working and complete the necessary operations to get a final answer. I do hope you have found this recording helpful. I'd appreciate it very much if you take a moment to complete our on-demand event feedback form for this Check Questions Maths Functional Skills session. The survey is completely anonymous. However, if you do have questions following this recording, or you'd like me to get in touch to provide some support, there is an option in the survey to give your email address. Thank you so much for your time.